All right, so let's bring in Tim MacMahon. He joins me for more on the turmoil in Houston. So, Tim, you just heard the comments from Daryl Morey. From your reporting, why is there tension between Harden and Paul?
I think the root of the issues, according to what team sources tell me, between James Harden and Chris Paul is a difference in their preferred playing styles and some personality clashes. You know, Chris Paul at this point, that ISO-heavy offense does not suit him nearly as well as it did his first season in Houston. James Harden's the best isolation player, arguably, in league history, whereas Chris Paul, he wants more sets. He wants more plays, more screening, more deception, where James Harden's looking at this saying, hey, me playing one-on-one and the team playing off of me has allowed the Rockets to be a historically elite offense the last couple of years. Now, Chris Paul is not one who shies away from making his feelings known, his opinion felt. And, you know, he is, in the words of one source, pestered and pestered and pestered. James Harden, on the other hand, is not a guy who seeks out conflict, but there were times where he'd had enough, where he snapped back at Chris Paul, where he told him essentially he's not the smartest guy in the room all the time. He doesn't know everything. He doesn't need to talk all the time. And, you know, he feels like Chris Paul tries to coach him, and frankly, he's not interested in that.
So what effect does the tension have on the information we've heard now that they're shopping Chris Paul?
Well, and Daryl Morey's made it clear that the odds of Chris Paul being moved are slim to none. Simply, look, I mean, realistically, for them to get good basketball value for Chris Paul is nearly impossible given his age and the fact that he's 1 year into a 4-year max contract. It's just nearly impossible to pull off that kind of deal. So, you know, while they might have wanted to explore that, it is almost a 100% chance that Chris Paul will be back in a Rockets uniform next year. They feel that this tension between two alpha dogs is typical for the NBA, that it can be managed. And like I said, that's essentially a must for the Rockets, because if they trade Chris Paul at this point, it's essentially closing the window on their chance to be a contender.
How does this kind of tension manifest itself on court?
Well, there were times this season where Chris Paul's running the second unit, sees James Harden get up to check back into the game, and barks at the bench, you know, telling Mike D'Antoni, rest him longer, I got this, leave him out. You know, James Harden's not trying to hear that. In the fourth quarter of Game 6, their final game of the season, as the Warriors are pulling off this comeback, you know, they're bickering at each other. Chris Paul wants to run plays and sets. James Harden wants to play one-on-one basketball and have them play off him. And so, you know, there are times where that creative tension and that friction, you know, does affect them either on the floor or just affect the dynamic of, you know, how awkward is it for Chris Paul to be barking at the coach to keep the reigning MVP off the floor.
You know, there's another part of this. I see Daryl Morey. He's been upfront about what he thinks about this. Tillman Fertitta, the owner, also upfront about the D'Antoni issue. That idea of being very transparent publicly, wonderful for us. How does that affect the team?
You know, I think that they wish that this had not played out nearly as much in the public. And it's one of those things where Tillman Fertitta really kind of points the finger at Warren Legary, who's Mike D'Antoni's longtime agent, one of his best friends, for starting that. And, you know, Legary's looking at this saying, no. They were responding in the press. So they can't even agree kind of who threw the first grenade. But they've gone back and forth in the press. They've unfortunately kind of negotiated this extension, which they'd gotten close on, they felt. Now they're not, but they've done it through the media. And, you know, it's a situation that really hasn't benefited either side.
All right, Tim, thank you. By the way, you can read Tim's enlightening article on the Rockets' turmoil on ESPN.com. Check that out.